I've gone back and forth about whether I want to make a video about this, especially since Joey Zigeha and Mugen put out some genuinely great breakdowns, and that despite Genshin and Hoyoverse being at the center of a lot of this, what I have to add to the discussion doesn't really relate to Genshin. So I gotta ask, if you like this video but don't care about Genshin, subscribe to my second channel, Not Here. If you subscribe here, the next time I post a Genshin video, it'll show up in your timeline, you won't click it, and my click-through rate will pay the price. Over the past week, discussion around the Sag-Aftra video game strike as well as Hoyoverse work refusal has heated up again as Elias, I'm not even going to begin to try to pronounce that last name, put out a now deleted post revealing his frustrations after Sag-Aftra continues to draw out the negotiations despite him voting no on the strike. Shortly after, it was revealed that Hoyoverse had removed Caleb Yen and Rachel Chow as the voice actors for the game's male and female main characters. Then, on May 20th, I saw a quote tweet that had blown up talking about how Sag-Aftra has ruined the careers of VAs working on Hoyo projects and potentially damaged the entire English dubbing industry, and I thought, maybe it's a good time to take a look at the bigger picture here. Before we do, I want you all to know ahead of time, I'm generally pro-union, and you may think this is a bit tinfoil hat of me, but I think AI poses an existential threat to all workers, not just actors, and that we need AI protections yesterday. But as VA Kiba Walker came dangerously close to realizing with this tweet after Joey Zigeha's video, it's hard to talk about this honestly without giving an unfavorable impression of Sag-Aftra and the people striking. So what is the bigger picture? Well, to answer that, we need to go back in time. Not to the beginning of the strike in July, but 18 years. November 5th, 2008. The Writers Guild of America began their strike against the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers. The strike was primarily to negotiate for residuals on DVD sales, which is perfectly demonstrative of the WGA's foresight at the time. The same year Netflix adopted its streaming service, the WGA's biggest concern was DVD residuals. That framing is a bit unfair. New media like streaming services and video on demand were important parts of the strike, but there were major oversights that wouldn't be addressed until 15 years later. But either way, the lack of foresight is the critical takeaway here. At the onset of the strike, broadcast networks' biggest live programs, The Late Show with David Letterman, The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and Late Night with Conan O'Brien, were immediately faced with a difficult choice. Go off the air in solidarity with their striking writers, or continue to produce the show without writers. And despite the strike not necessitating that work on the shows would stop, Conan, Leno, and Letterman all would decide to go off the air in a show of solidarity. Sound familiar? This caused a change in viewer habits practically overnight. They ditched broadcast networks for networks and services that had an infinite well of content libraries like cable TV and services like Netflix and YouTube that were already seeing growing popularity. But there was something brewing behind the scenes. Those late night shows may have ended production for the time being, but the networks and their production companies were doing the opposite. They had advertisers to please, and that meant they had to produce something. So they did. Reality shows had already been growing in popularity prior to the strike, but for a variety of reasons, advertisers paid lower CPMs for them. So networks weren't exactly eager to put their eggs in that basket. But now, well, they've got to fill the time slot somehow. At first, it was gradual. The networks had a decent amount of programming that had already made it through production and was just waiting to air. So viewers still got their primetime fixes for a bit. But while those episodes were airing, the network's production companies were hard at work, desperately putting together as much trash TV as they could. Shows like Big Brother and Amazing Race were instantly renewed for second seasons. Shows like Celebrity Apprentice had their renewals accelerated. Drew Carey was back on primetime with special episodes of The Price is Right, and E! dropped Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Yes, the 2008 WGA strike is the reason why you know who these people are. It wasn't great for the networks at first, but the strike lasted for 100 days. If you set up a pile of crap on a plate and call it cake with no other options, eventually people are going to take a bite of that cake. And if those people turn out to be coprophagic, the people serving that cake are going to notice. These shows were 65 to 80% cheaper to produce. And now the networks had proven to advertisers there was not only a significant audience for them, but that they were easier to target ads toward. So by the end of the strike, advertisers were bidding top dollar for slots on these shows that used to be money sinks just to fill time slots. So what was a last-ditch effort to stay afloat ended up accelerating a trend to become the new standard. Not only that, but produced shows got shorter and writers' rooms got smaller because those 100 days proved across the board that production companies could do more with less. Seasons used to average 22 to 24 episodes, but by 2023, the most recent WGA strike, the average length of a season had dropped to 8 to 13 episodes, and given that season 2 of The Last of Us is about to end after 7 episodes, I think it's safe to say that trend is still headed downwards. In addition to AI protections, the 2023 strike was primarily focused on a few key issues. 1. Loopholes for residuals with streaming services. 2. The lack of ongoing work because of shorter productions. And 3. The practice of mini-crews, severely limiting the amount of work available on any given project. It's not a stretch to say the 2008 WGA strike was directly responsible for most of their primary issues in the 2023 strike. To be clear, at the time, WGA was seen as coming out on top with these negotiations. They succeeded in getting better compensation for their members and DVD residuals at the time that DVD was becoming obsolete. Yay. However, as a result of the strike, networks started producing more reality TV and game shows that didn't need writers, leading to less jobs. Due to the length of the strike, viewers started engaging more with those shows, leading to less incentive for production companies to make shows that need writers. The jobs that were there for writers got shorter, leading to more time between jobs, and writers' rooms were downsized, leading to less opportunities for the already dwindling supply of jobs. And what I think is even worse is that all of those things that I just described as losing jobs for writers affected SAG actors in the same way when they weren't even part of the negotiations and saw none of the benefits WGA did manage to walk away with for their members. So, what can we learn from then that can be applied to the Sag-Aftra strike now? Well, and y'all are just gonna have to hang with me a bit because at first this is gonna sound like just a totally unhinged tangent, but hear me out. Over the past few years, gamers have grown increasingly frustrated with narrative games. You know, the games that rely on voice actors the most. Now, some of that is definitely due to all the isms and phobics, but the thing that these companies and journalists are missing is that gamers aren't as brainless as they think they are. They aren't generally opposed to having characters of different races, genders, and sexuality in their games. Gears of War's principal cast consisted of a Mediterranean, a Latino, a black man, a white man, a southerner, an East Asian, and a Pacific Islander, and they're getting ready to release their 8th game. Life is Strange has a 96% overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam with 169,000 reviews, and it features a female protagonist with a female love interest, with a dead female love interest, and every leftist cultural issue you might encounter in an episode of Euphoria, and it came out with their 6th game just last year. That's not even to mention Baldur's Gate 3, which lets you be whoever you want and designs the game and its characters around accommodating that, and was almost universally loved for it. It's not that gamers are bigoted, it's that when you put a coming out scene in a game for a character to proudly declare they're non-binary, gamers see it for what it is: tokenism. And maybe I'm showing my age with this, but tokenism used to be considered a microaggression. If you make a good game with interesting characters and prioritize crafting the story of those characters, most gamers could care less if there was a pansexual mask-presenting black trans woman. And I know some of you are asking, what does any of this have to do with the strike? Well, kind of everything. Remember how networks and production companies shifted to producing programs that don't rely on writers during the WGA strike, right as reality shows were becoming more popular? What do you think game developers are doing right now as a result of not being able to work with voice actors? They, right now, are making games that don't heavily rely on voice actors. And it's coming at a time when the people that buy games are losing interest in narrative games. They're making remastered games, sports games, action games, survival games at a time when just yesterday, GameSpot released a list of the top selling games so far this year with 8 sports games, 5 games that have been out for multiple years, 1 remaster, 1 FPS, and 1 RTS. And if you can't do the math, that leaves only 4 out of the top 20 selling games that need a substantial amount of voice acting. There's already a growing trend of gamers moving away from narrative games, and we're about to see a lot less of them as a direct result of the strike. That means that trend is only going to grow. Publishers are going to take note and shift their focus away from narrative games the same way producers shifted their focus away from scripted television. That means when the strike is over, just like before, the voice actors might walk away with some great concessions, but there are going to be a lot less jobs available to benefit from them. And just how actors caught strays from the WGA strike, the less jobs for VAs directly translates to less jobs for the writers that create their dialogue. But it's even worse because we're still seeing the fallout from the WGA strike 18 years later, and I can't believe we've gotten to a point where I need to say it like this. It only lasted 100 days. The Sag-Aftra strike has been going on for 10 months. Every day that goes by, the gaming industry is getting one step further away from needing voice actors. The cherry on top, and this is really gonna piss y'all off, in March, Variety reported that Sag-Aftra and the striked companies had already found common ground on 24 of the 25 issues in their proposal. The main hang-up? AI replicas for motion capture. The voice acting stuff has been settled for months, and the union is drawing out negotiations on mocap. I don't know if y'all seen the new VO demos, but that feels an awful lot like WGA fighting to get residuals for DVDs. Fighting tooth and nail for a benefit that's already becoming an antiquated technology. History may not repeat itself, but it sure as fuck rhymes.